So we're working on the independent samples t-test. The assignment can be found on page 396 in your book, task 1. You will notice that I have changed the name of the data set, which is originally called penis. I've changed it to books. I don't necessarily find that to be offensive, but I also don't find it to be funny. But if somebody does find it to be offensive, just for the sake of that person, I'm changing this to books. I've opened R Commander already, and I've activated books in R Commander. I'm going to look at the data set, see what it looks like. Okay, so as I do this, I can see that we have about 20 cases. The 2 indicates one book, and the 1 indicates another book. If we scroll up, you will see that there's a 1 and there's also a 2. So 2 books and an outcome variable of happiness. Let's close this up right here. We have a problem with the data because R Commander is not recognizing this data as a grouping variable, and we actually want to have 2 groups. We want to have a group that read one book and another group that read the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this numerical variable, which is called books right now, and I'm going to convert it into a factor. So I'm going to click on convert to, and take book, and I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to call this new book. That's just an easy name for me, new book. And I'm going to say supply the level names. Okay, I want to do that. For 1, I'm going to call it Venus, just because it's easy and convenient for me. And the other one is going to be called Marie. Let's go. Yeah, there you go. So here we go. Venus and Marie. These are going to be 2 books. So the question was, if after reading these 2 books, there was a significant difference between the happiness score of 2 groups. One group that read the Venus book and one group that read the Marie book. The null hypothesis was something like there is no difference between happiness of these 2 groups after having read this book. So we're going to see if we can fail to reject the null hypothesis, or if we can reject the null hypothesis. So click on OK. Now we have a grouping variable. Let's go ahead and look at the data set again. Now we have a grouping variable, Venus and Marie. If I can scroll this down somehow. Thank you. So Marie. And that grouping variable has been labeled new book. The outcome variable remains happy. So the first thing I need to do is I need to make sure that I am meeting the assumptions of the analysis for the t-test. And to do that, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to summarize the numerical variables, and I'm going to summarize them by group. So I'm going to click on happiness. I'm going to click on summarize by groups, and I'm going to say okay, because that's the grouping variable in new books, and I'm going to click on statistics and say, hey, I want to get skewness and kurtosis, because one of the assumptions is normal distribution or normality of distribution. Another one of the assumptions is that the outcome variable is in the continuous level of measurement, and particularly at the minimum of the ordinal level. So let's go ahead and click on OK, because we have already seen that the variable is actually on a continuous numerical ordinal, at least ordinal level. And so I've just done that. I'm going to go to RStudio and I'm going to verify my data. So I'm looking at my data now, and I see that I have a mean of 20.0 for Venus, and actually I spelled that incorrectly, Venus, and Marie 24.2. I can look at my skewness measurements, and I can see that these guys are not particularly skewed, and I'm looking at kurtosis, and these guys are not particularly kurtose. And so with that said, I am almost ready to run this analysis. There is actually one more thing that I want to do, and I want to check on homogeneity of variance, because that's one of the other assumptions that we need to meet in order to run a t-test and have interpretable results. So let's go ahead and click on statistics. Let's click on variances, and let's run a Levene's test. Levene's test helps us determine whether there's a difference in the variance of these 2 groups. And if there's a difference in the variance of these 2 groups, we actually need to be mindful of the next step in terms of analysis. So let's go with new book and the variable happiness. That's the outcome variable. And let's do this based on the mean. You might have a rationale for doing it based on the median. In this case, we're simply going to use the Levene's test based on the mean, and we're going to click on OK. Now, if these groups had statistically significant variances, different variances, then we would have, as we're looking at RStudio, we would have probably a larger F value ratio, or F ratio value, and a significant P value, something that would be measured in something like less than P equals 0.05. In this case, we have a P value of 0.49, which tells us that these two groups, in terms of variance, are not statistically significant. Very good. So we have met the assumption of homogeneity of variance. We can actually run the test now. So let's click on statistics. And this is a means test, or a test that's based on means. And it's an independent sample t-test because we have two groups, different readers reading different books, and then looking at the measure of happiness after having read those books. Let's click on independent samples t-test. We know that the grouping variable is new book. One is called Venus, or actually misspelled it, so it's Venus in my case, and Marie. And the outcome variable is happiness. Now, we have not made a declaration in terms of this study, the declaration in terms of whether we are looking for one group being higher than the other or lower than the other. So in this case, we simply declare a two-sided t-test, and our confidence level, as typically for social science research, is going to be 0.95, and we can simply click on, whoa, we need to click on assume equal variances. Yes, because we've already checked that we have equal variances in these groups, so we can assume equal variances and click on OK. So once we click on OK, we can go back to RStudio and interpret our results. We ran a t-test on the data, happy by new book. So the grouping variable was new book. Those were the two groups that we compared, the Venus book and the Marie book, or whatever that was called. The t-test, the t-statistic is negative 2.12. The degrees of freedom are 18, which is usually the sample size minus the number of tests that were conducted. And the p-value in this case is smaller than 0.05. Because this is smaller than 0.05, we can say that these differences are not by chance, and we can reject the null hypotheses that suggest that there is no difference between the means of these two groups. The next thing that we would look at is the means of the two groups. And when we report this, we would report our t-statistics, our degrees of freedom, the p-value, and we would also report the means of the two groups. That concludes this presentation.